Again, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started with the quarterly data quality process webinar for today. My name is Alexander Fuller, HMIS analyst here at Chicago. Today is August 19th and is also the start of the data quality process. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Everyone is on mute. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I do encourage that you do ask questions as we do go through this presentation. Any questions you do have, please utilize the questions function in GoToWebinar, and I'll try to answer them in real time. Any specific questions might have to end up being resolved via help desk ticket, but please ask questions as we go through. So we're going to go over the context of why the data quality process is important, missing values and data issues, child-only entries, utilization, timeliness, who participates, the report details, the overview of the process, the submission process, the data quality timeline, accessing and reviewing the report is going to be a live demo, as well as troubleshooting and resources and support. And if we have any time, any additional questions, we can answer then. So the Chicago Continuum of Care, COC, utilizes data-informed approaches to coordinate services and resources in an effort to end homelessness. Homeless Management System, which is HMIS, data quality is an important factor to measure efforts to end or prevent homelessness. The COC relies on the work of all providers of all funding types to enter accurate, complete, and timely data to ensure we have the information we need to make informed decisions as a community. Due to this importance on data, in order to maintain data quality, providers in HMIS are expected to participate in a quarterly data quality process that addresses data in the following 4 areas. Missing values, data concerns, data issues, child-only entries, bed utilization, and timeliness. So the first thing that we're going to go over is missing values and data issues. So the table that you see in the screenshot here is what you'll see in the summary tab of the data quality report you download from Business Objects. The data elements listed are elements that are going to be reviewed in the data quality report itself. So no more than 5% of clients enrolled in the project can miss any data element, including the data not collected answers. Name, social security number, and date of birth are elements in which client doesn't know and client prefers not to answer are included as errors. So an example of that would be for veteran status, if a client indicated that they prefer not to answer that question, that wouldn't necessarily be considered an error. But if for date of birth, someone indicated that they prefer not to answer, that would be considered an error. So only those 3 elements, those additional pick list values will be considered errors as well. One thing to keep in mind or to be aware of is the required for column in the report. So this column is going to let you know what clients are being measured for this or for that particular data element. So for elements such as name, social security number, date of birth, race, those are required for all clients. So if you're looking at your data quality details tab, which shows all the details about the clients that are enrolled in your project, every client on that tab is going to be included for name, social security number, and date of birth. Where you have things such as client location that's only for the head of household only. So that particular measure, if you look at your details tab, you're going to only look for head of households, and those are only going to be the clients that are going to populate as errors for that particular measure. Are there any questions about missing values before we move over to the next slide? Okay. I'm sorry, my mouse is not acting correctly today. Okay, so a continuance of missing values. One thing that's been consistent this year is the change that was made to the 2024 data standards in which primary race and ethnicity fields were replaced into a combined race and ethnicity field. So in the report, the summary tab A and the details tab B have been updated and will now only pull the new race and ethnicity field. It's pretty standard at this point, but in that details tab, the ethnicity column is still present. And that's just for reporting purposes on our end. But that entire column is going to be marked as retired in red. So there's nothing to address there. It's just letting you know that that field is retired. The ethnicity field on the summary tab is going to be marked as 0% always. So there's never going to be an error for ethnicity. So everything that's populating for race and ethnicity will now show up in the race data element row. So for child-only entries, essentially, there should be 0 child-only entries in your project unless your project is funded to serve youth. A child-only entry is flagged when a child under the age of 18 is enrolled in a project without being connected to a parent or guardian. In most cases, the reason for this is that the child came into the enrollment after the head of household or the guardians enrolled, and an enrollment was created for the child, but it was separate from the enrollment, the existing enrollment for the parent or guardian. So in those cases, that child isn't connected to the overall family, so they appear to be by themselves, and that's why they appear as a child-only entry. The second reason would be the client's date of birth is missing. So the way that that's measured is that if a client's date of birth is missing, they automatically kind of get a 0 value since there's no date, and they'll show up as a child-only entry. In most cases, if it is due to a missing date of birth, that will also show up as an error in the date of birth details tab on the summary. So you should see that in 2 places. So if you have 2 clients missing the date of birth and then 2 clients set as child only entry, and if they're the same client, if you fix it, it should correct in both places. If your project is funded to work with youth, we do ask that you send in a ticket to the help desk just so that we're aware of it when we're reviewing the submissions. Okay, are there any questions before we move over to utilization? Okay, so for the bed and unit utilization, these percentages must be within the following ranges for these particular project types. So if for emergency shelter and transitional housing, the percentage should be between 80% and 105%. For permanent supportive housing, the percentage should be between 85% or greater. And for safe havens, it should be between 85% and 105%. So the way that utilization works is that the majority of project types that's going to be completing data quality is going to be looking at how many clients were enrolled in your project on May 22nd, 2024, which is the point in time date for this iteration of DQ, as compared to how many bids and units are indicated in your bid and unit inventory list in HMIS. So for permanent supportive housing projects, these projects are required to have a housing move-in date for clients that is on or prior to May 22nd, 2024 to be included. I'll go a little bit more in the next slide or two about permanent supportive housing projects and the housing movement date. But if a project is over or underutilizing its bed list, but is in compliance for its unit utilization, then the project will still be in compliance. The opposite situation would also be true. So as long as either the bed or unit utilization is in compliance, the project as a whole will be considered compliant. So in my next slide here, I have an example. Oh man. Sorry about that. So in this slide here, I do have an example of what the table looks like on the summary tab for utilization. So at the very top, we have bed utilization, and right under we have the unit utilization. The way that utilization should be viewed for either bed or units is that beds are directly looking at individual client records. So if you're looking at your details tab, individual client ID numbers would be the count for enrolled. This is not including PS permanent supportive housing, but for all other project types that don't have that housing moving day requirement is looking at the overall count of client IDs on that point in time date. Where the unit utilization, if you're looking at the details tab, is the cumulative count of group ID numbers in that list. So one is looking at households and one is looking at individual clients. So to be compliant overall, only one has to be in compliance. So if you don't make the percentage for your project type for unit utilization, but you're within the range for the bed utilization, then your project will be in compliance. We do have a question. How does a shelter have 105 bed unit utilization? So it's a couple of ways that this typically happens. So the inventory that is provided to HMIS on a project, if that's not updated based on the funding or how the project is operating, then there could be a chance that the inventory that we have is lower than the actual occupancy of the project. So the project can actually accept more clients than we have inventory for. This could be due to having non-funded bids or non-funded or bids that's funded under a different funding source that might not be included in your inventory in HMIS, but you are counting those clients in enrollments. You could have a utilization higher. So all of this really just depends on what your bed unit inventory is set to in HMIS. Unless any changes have been made within the last few months, the last big update to the bed and unit utilizations was with the housing inventory count. So based on the submissions of providers, that was updated if there was any changes. But since then, only updates are based on request. Okay, so we're just going to go over utilization changes. So in the last iteration of data quality, we did introduce the housing moving day column. So the idea of that column is to give permanent supportive housing providers a chance to see the actual clients that's being counted. So without knowing the housing moving day, you wouldn't know what clients made up that cumulative total on the summary page. So permanent supportive housing clients, again, must have a housing moving date added that is on or before the point in time date. And that housing moving date has to be on or after the entry date of that client. So housing moving dates before the entry date or after the point in time date, which is 5/22/2024, will not be included in the utilization table. They'll show up on the details tab as date out of range. Date out of range is not always an indication of an error. If the client has a housing moving date after 5/22/2024, they will not be included in the utilization table, but this data should not be changed in HMIS if it's a valid entry. So what all of this means is that this housing movement date column, the sole purpose of it is to give you an idea of who's being counted in your utilization. Clients that aren't being counted either will have a null value because their housing movement date field is blank, or they'll have a date out of range, meaning that the housing movement date that is assigned or added to that client is before the client's enrollment, meaning that they were housed prior to enrolling in your project, which should indicate an error or something that should be corrected, or that the housing movement date is after the point in time date set for this iteration of data quality. So if you have a client that enrolled on 5/23/2024, although their housing movement date is valid, and that's the date that they moved in, they wouldn't be counted in this iteration of data quality just because as of May 22nd, they were not housed in the project. So it's not an error or anything that needs to be corrected, but they're just not being counted in this iteration of data quality. Are there any questions about utilization? Okay, any questions about anything we covered so far? Okay. So let's go over timeliness. Timeliness is tracked through an automated report created by All Chicago. This timeliness report will track the timeliness at entry, at exit, at housing moving date, and for shelter services. Timeliness measures the time it takes to create an element HMIS. This measure applies even if an entry is backdated. For instance, if a client originally came into the project on 6/1/2024, but they were not entered into HMIS until 6/4/2024, the information will be considered out of compliance as it took 3 days to indicate that the client was enrolled in the project. Timeliness data cannot be corrected. So for timeliness, again, what's being measured is the actual time that data was entered into HMIS, not the date that it was set for. So for enrollments, if you have a project and you have a client and you're enrolling them, let's say 6/1/2024, and that's the date that you're actually doing the data entry, then there's going to be it's going to be in compliance because it's 0 days. But if you are doing an enrollment for 6/1/2024 and the current date is 6/15/2024 and you backdate that information in HMIS, it's still going to show as out of compliance because what's being measured is the actual time that the user put that data into HMIS and not the date that was set. So who participates? All projects, regardless of funding, are required to participate in the quarterly data quality process so long as the project is active and has at least one client enrolled. So we do have a help desk article that goes over the active projects currently in the system. If a project does not enter data into HMIS, they are not required to participate. So projects such as DV, if your project doesn't enter into HMIS, you wouldn't have anything to pull out. So one thing that I do want to mention is that overall, all project types are required to participate. Project types such as homeless prevention and in some cases services only aren't required to participate. Homeless prevention isn't set up in a way in which the data quality report pulls in all measures that they're completing within the state homeless prevention assessment. When it comes to services only, it depends on the project itself. So if the project is completing enrollments and doing filling out assessments, we do ask that they participate in data quality. Some services only projects don't complete enrollments and only complete service transactions. And again, that wouldn't be captured in the data quality reports. So if you have any questions about if your project should participate or not, please reach out to the help desk and we can help sort that out. So the report details, this is going over the report that you'll generate out of business objects. So reports must be generated for one project at a time. So if you have more than one project at your agency that you need to complete data quality reports for, you would have to do those individually. You can't group them up in any way. The report will be looking at the period from April 1st of 2024 to June 30th of 2024. One thing that I didn't add here is that in business objects, when you're running the report, the prompt will go from April 1st to July 1st. And the reason for that is that we're including the end date plus 1 day, just to make sure that we're capturing all data up until midnight. So in the report, you would leave it as July 1st, but it's only going to be looking at data between April 1st and June 30th. Also, the point in time date, as we went over, is May 22nd. In business objects, we have it set as May 23rd, again, accounting for the date plus 1. And that's just to make sure that we're capturing all the data up until midnight. So the overview for this quarter, the data quality process will go from today until August 30th. There will only be one round for submission, so providers will not need to send in data quality reports until they're ready, officially ready for them to be submitted. The business objects reports, which can be downloaded only by users with access to business objects, will cover the missing values, the child-only entries, and the bed utilization. One very important thing to keep in mind is that changes made in HMIS will not generate in business objects until the following day. So if reports are due on August 30th, if you're making changes to data in HMIS on August 30th, there's no way for you to see the results of that data change on the same day. So if you're making changes on August 30th, you're not going to be able to download a report with those changes and submit them on the same day. The report will be available the next day. For the timeliness reports, those are being sent out to ATAs via email. So those should go out sometime this week. Are there any questions so far about anything we've covered? Okay. So when you get ready to submit the reports, again, they should all be submitted by August 30th, which is the deadline. The files, once you download them to your computer, you will have to rename them so that the project ID number replaces the dashes, and then the year, month, date is added to replace the year, month, date format in the file name. The project ID number that you're going to add there must be 4 digits. So if your project is only 3 digits, which are the older projects in the system, so if it's 3 digits, you're going to want to put a 0 before the project ID number just to make it a 4-digit number. Okay, when you get ready to send the reports in, all data quality reports must be sent to dataquality@allchicago.org, and the subject line must be data quality report submission attachments. If either of these two are different, there is a chance that your report isn't going to get included in the submissions. My recommendation is that we have a help desk article that goes over the requirements for sending in the reports. I just recommend just copying and pasting the exact wording from the article and just paste it into your email, just to make sure that there's no misalignments or anything like that. Agencies with more than one project can attach all of their data quality reports together and only send one email, so they don't have to send them individually. So this is different than running the reports for multiple projects. So you can't have multiple projects in one data quality Excel file, but you can include multiple Excel files of different projects in your submission, so you only have to submit one. Okay, so this is just kind of a quick overview of the timeline. We sent out notices to the community August 8th and the 14th. Again, today is the start of the data quality process. So following this webinar, you can begin running the reports and reviewing the data. The correction period that I have here is between August 19th and August 29th. So I count that as the correction period again because data takes 1 day to populate in the data quality report. So all of the changes that you're making to clients should be done by August 29th so that that data is available by the submission date, which is August 30th. Okay, so we do have one question. Can there be different spreadsheets from different organizations in one email? I report for 2 different organizations. Um, that's a very good question. And I would say just to ensure that everything gets submitted appropriately and reviewed appropriately, I would create 2 separate emails and only include the projects for one organization and the next email for the second organization. I wouldn't combine them just to ensure that there's no issues with the submission. Okay, so what I wanted to do is go over how to access the report in business objects. So hopefully everyone is able to see my screen and business objects here. Okay, so we do have one question before we move over to the demonstration. For a client file that requires updating data, but the file is locked, how does one unlock that file to match those update or to make those update corrections and then lock the file again? So if you have a client that is locked, that is enrolled in your project already, my initial assumption is that the client record is locked, but the user is probably in EDA mode, which is not included in that visibility table. So being in interdata as mode causes a lot of visibility issues since everything usually is supposed to happen at the agency level. So outside of interdata as mode, if you just log into HMIS and go directly to that client, you should be able to see the data. If that isn't the case, just submit a help desk ticket and we can look further into it. But anything that's locked in, you've already had access to it. More than likely you still do. You're just in the incorrect visibility, the incorrect interdata as mode. Okay, so I'm going to go over how to access the report in Business Objects and where it's located. And then we're going to go over a little bit of troubleshooting the report and where things can be found. So if you're getting ready to run the report, you're going to want to connect to Business Objects. That can be done at the top right of your screen or in the Reports tab on the left, and Business Objects can be found at the bottom. Going about it either way will open up a new tab. When you're in Business Objects, you're going to click on Folders, Public Folder, Chicago Live folder, Chicago COC Reports, and Data Quality. From there, you would see the Chicago DQ with the 4 dashes, the year, month, date. And you can do one or two things. You can either schedule the report, which you can do by right-clicking on it and clicking schedule, and kind of go through the prompts to have that generate at the frequency that you want it or want to receive it. Or you could just click on the report itself. The prompt should pop up pretty quickly. Okay, so when you're in Business Objects, this is what the prompt is going to look like when you're generating your report. For providers here, you should have a list of only the providers at your agency. So you can either select from that list in the pick list, or you can search for the name or the project ID number to narrow it down. But I'm going to just search for our All Chicago Permanent Supportive Housing Project. The start date and the end date and the point in time date are all preset for this iteration of data quality. So there's no need to make any changes to these prompts here. Enter data as provider should always be left as default provider. If you're running a report and your report looks odd, or you have or you see things that typically you haven't seen in the data quality report before, it could be due to having a provider here set as the EDA provider. So make sure that this is always set as default. The effective date is set in the future, so there's no need to make any adjustments to effective date. So essentially all that needs to be done is just selecting the project that you want to run the report for. And once you're done, you can select run. So I actually have an example of what the output of that looks like. Is everyone still able to see my screen? Okay. So this is what the summary page looks like. Again, when you're reviewing the summary, be mindful of the required for, just so you know who's being counted for these particular data elements. Again, the ethnicity is always going to be 0%. And then right underneath is where you have your child only entries and then your bed utilization. My recommendation is to review this client details key, because this provides information on where all of the questions are that are being shown on the client details tab, as well as an explanation of what either the colored cells mean or what different alerters are indicating. So this is kind of just a small example of what the report is going to look like. Again, one thing to kind of quickly cover is the bed and unit utilization. If you're looking at the clients being counted for bed utilization, it would be the total client count. If this is in a permanent supportive housing project, so if this is a project such as emergency shelter, the count is gonna be the unique client IDs. So these two appear to be the same, so that's gonna be counted as 1, 2, and then 3 would be the bed utilization. And then for the group ID numbers would be your household count. So any households that are, or clients that are grouped together will have the same group ID number, so they'll only be counted once. In this case, these are all individual clients, so that's why the utilization is 5, or the households enrolled is 5. Elements such as first name, last name, social security number, those are going to be found in the client profile and not necessarily in the assessment. Client's date of birth is going to be found in the assessment, so if there's any errors with that, that's where you'll make that change. Again, ethnicity has all retired here, so this is something that you can kind of ignore as you're reviewing the data. Any null values in race and ethnicity is going to correspond with the null value in the assessment that's currently available for your project. So when it comes to the prior living situation, length of stay, relationship to head of household, in a moment, I'm going to kind of go over an example of what usually is the issue with errors that might appear here. And then for the sub-assessment data, which is going to be your disability at entry and exit, your income at entry and exit, non-cash benefit at entry and exit, insurance at entry and exit, the values that are going to appear here are either going to be okay, which means that there's no errors or no concerns. HUD VASH, meaning that the HUD verification, the HUD verification isn't completed for that particular sub-assessment, or it's going to have mismatch, which means that either the HUD verification is indicating that, for example, for income, that the client isn't receiving income, but the initial income question indicates that they are. So that's a mismatch between the two questions, so that would appear here also. Clients that aren't exited out of your project will show up as a dash, just because we can't measure income at exit if the client hasn't exited yet. And then also, again, for the housing moving date column, only dates that will appear here are going to be dates that are going to be valid for the report point in time date. So if you have a null value or a date out of range value, then those will not appear in this cumulative total here for permanent supportive housing projects. The next tab here is child-only entries. Just as an example, we see that these clients here are missing the date of birth, which is probably the reason why they're showing up as a child-only entry. So in most cases, that's the first place I would start in reviewing, is to see if the date of birth is missing. And then next, I would go to the client and see if they're attached to the parent or guardian that also should be in the project. The next tab is going to show your inventory information. So it's going to show your inventory name, which in most cases indicates if it's a single or families. The next row here, the household type, is going to indicate that also, but it's going to show the actual HUD value. So yeah, it's going to just show the HUD value, but basically representing if it's a if it's child or child only beds, adults with one child, or single adults. The bed type is going to indicate if it's a facility based or voucher. The bed availability is going to give you your it's going to let you know if it's seasonal beds. The unit inventory is going to give you your total unit count, and then the bed inventory is going to give you your total bed count. If you have more than one bed inventory, an additional column would appear here that's going to give you that additional inventory. So essentially, the only inventory that's going to be included is inventories in which the start date and end date are on the point in time date. So if you've updated your inventory prior to this data quality process, and you started a new inventory, let's say in March, this report's not going to show the inventory that was available in March. It's going to show the inventory that was available on May 22nd. And then this last column, or this last tab here, additional information, is pretty much just giving you information on the report parameters. So the start date, end date, the point in time date, and the date that you are running the report for. And then also the project that you're running, and then the total count of clients that are being included. So to kind of quickly go over a bit of data correction, things that I've seen providers have questions about. Again, when it comes to the client profile here, the only thing that's going to need to be changed here if you have errors is the name data quality, social security number, and social security number data quality, and veteran status. I don't think I mentioned that previous, but veteran status is also one of the data elements that you would correct in a client profile and not in your project assessment. Although date of birth does appear here in client demographic, if you change this date, it's not going to affect the date that's populated in the report. So it's important that if you're updating or correcting any date of birth errors, that's done within the assessment. So if we go to an assessment, we see that there is a date of birth field here. This is where all date of birth should be added and corrected. When it comes to the relationship to head of household, if there's more than one client enrolled in your project, again, you want to make sure that these are set correctly and make sure that all clients are included, and that way you don't have the child only entries. Let's see, one thing that typically happens is when it comes to updating values that already exist in the system. So if you have for example, if you're running this report and your prior living situation is place not meant for habitation, and that's what's populating in the report, and it's supposed to be something different, rental by client with ongoing subsidy. That's just as an example, that's what you want it to populate. In those cases, the reason for that is that the dates overlap, and one of those would have to be removed. I believe I did an example. Okay, so here's an example of what that looks like with relationship of head of household. So if I run this report right now, the client enrolled on today at 6:24 a.m. and we see that we have two different values for that exact same time. So in most cases, what's going to pull into the report is the initial value that was added, which is going to be head of household child. And this isn't correct. And you want it to show self. So no matter how many times you save self here in this enrollment, it's not going to change unless you actually remove this value here. So once you remove the incorrect value, then it's going to populate correctly. So if you're making changes to questions and they're not, and is not adjusting in the report, that's usually because it's a historic value somewhere that's overriding that. And that's usually because the date and the time are exactly the same. We do have one question. So the Illinois 510 field is red. Does it have to be made green? Okay, so that's a really good question and a good call out. So when it comes to these historic bars here, the color of that bar really doesn't have any significance to the overall enrollment process or the quality of the value selected. So if you have a red historic bar here for any question, but the value is correct, then there's no need to change it. So you can click on these to see the historic answers that were answered, but the color doesn't affect anything. So as long as the answer is correct, that's all that matters. Okay. Another thing that I did want to point out is that for permanent supportive housing projects, again, those projects must have a housing moving, or those clients must have a housing moving date to be captured in utilization. So what's being measured is, I'll do an example. So if you're doing a housing moving date for a client, the interim review type should be update housing moving date. And let's just set it for today. And sorry, we clicked on the wrong project. So let's just click here. So in most cases, the housing or your housing moving date should be added via interim when that housing moving date becomes available. The review type should be update housing moving date. And from there, it should default to the update assessment. You can tell what assessment you're on by either the select assessment section at the top here, or right below it, it has the name of the assessment that you're filling out. So in the update assessment, it has a field housing moving date. This is the field that needs to be completed for that housing moving date to populate in the housing moving date column of the data quality report, and also to be included in the cumulative total of utilization on the summary page. So the date that's being looked at is this housing movement date, and it's not the actual review date. So a review date and just indicating that it's a housing movement date is not putting in the housing moving date. So this doesn't count as adding the housing moving date. So if you have these and you still leave the housing moving date field blank, it's going to show blank on the report, and it's not going to look at this review date as a substitute for the actual question being answered. Okay, are there any questions before we move back to the slides? Okay. Okay, so again, I kind of went over it already, but for troubleshooting, the my recommendation to start first is looking at this client details key. Um, Again, it has all of the fields that we're looking at, and it's going to show you or tell you exactly where that's located in the assessment. And in some cases, it might provide how that's being calculated. And then also it provides information on the alerter. So you know what certain colors mean, what mismatch versus HUD verification means, null values. Um, and again, the name, data quality, and social security number and veteran question are the only things that's going to be found outside of the client enrollment. Everything else is going to be found in the assessment, whether that's at entry, interim, or exit. For the sub-assessments, when it comes to entry and exit, when you're reviewing those, if you have, just really quick, if you have an error at entry, when you're reviewing that, you should be clicking the pencil for the start date to review the values that were entered at the entry. If you have an error at exit for any of the sub-assessments, you should be clicking on the pencil next to the exit date to make those corrections or review why it's pulling in a certain way. So just make sure that you're looking at the right point in time when reviewing the at exit data elements. So we do have quite a few articles on our help desk that could potentially help answer questions as you review data. The two articles that reference the data quality process is our data quality process overview and running and interpreting the data quality report. So one report is essentially just an overview of the entire data quality process for this iteration of data quality. And then the second article is details about the data quality report itself and how to run it and how to review certain data elements within it. We do also have articles that go over sub-assessments and HUD verifications, as well as documenting the housing moving date and relationship to head of household. So the relationship to head of household article is going to be important if you have a child-only entry and you have household members that aren't connected to the head of household. That's going to be able to help you kind of figure that out. And we do understand that there may be need for further training assistance for users that are new to the process. We do have a couple of new agencies and projects that potentially will be completing data quality. So um, for those projects and any projects that's been around for a while, if you have any questions about the reporting process for assistance, please just reach out to the help desk and we'll uh, happily be able to answer any questions that come up. A part of the data quality process, we do also offer office hours in which we can schedule a 30-minute call to kind of review and talk through any data concerns or any data errors. These sessions are limited to 30 minutes, and that's outside of the email exchange. So the meeting itself will be 30 minutes. There are opportunities to schedule more time if available, if there's more things to talk about. But we do ask that an ATA or someone with business objects access is on the call as well as we go through things. This just makes it easier so you're able to pull reports or review data as you see it. In some cases, when we review data or pull reports on the behalf of providers, the data that we will pull at the help desk could be significantly different than what you'll pull at your agency. So it's also very important that if you are scheduling time to review, please provide any and all reports that are going to be a part of that conversation. So if you have a permanent supportive housing project and you have questions about non-cash benefits, please submit or include in the email the full data quality report for that project. That includes the summary, the details. That just helps us to be able to address your concern a little bit quicker. And then one last thing when it comes to these office hours is that time does fill up pretty fast within 2 weeks of availability that we have at the help desk. So if you are gonna reach out for assistance, we ask that you do that sooner than later. You know, reaching out on the 29th or the 28th kind of pushes makes it a little bit more difficult to accommodate requests for last minute meetings. So the sooner you're able to kind of let us know that you want to schedule something, the more likely we are to be able to accommodate. Okay, and we have about 2 minutes left for any questions or any outstanding questions. So we do have one. Will this presentation be available for later viewing? Yes. So after these webinars, we usually put up the recording within those 2 data quality articles. So it will be in the data quality overview article as well as in the data quality interpreting and running the reports article. That should be available at the very latest by tomorrow morning. But we'll try to have that up as soon as possible, as well as the slides that we went through today. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'll give everybody 1 minute of their time back. Thank you everyone for joining the call today. Again, if you have any questions that come up later, please reach out to the help desk and we'll be happy to assist with any of that. I am going to stay on for 1 more minute just for any last minute questions or anybody typing currently. But have a great rest of your day and thank you for joining. Okay, again, thank you everyone. I'm going to end the webinar now. Any outstanding questions, please reach out to the help desk. Again, have a great rest of your day.